I was used to judgmental glances at fancy events, but I had never felt an atmosphere as heavy as that night. The clinking of silverware against glass rang out, alongside murmurs and scattered laughter. Curious eyes turned toward me, like I was an uninvited guest. Next to my white cloth chair sat a small nameplate. In bold letters beneath my name it read, "Imposter Father, Uneducated and Poor." I froze. It took me a moment to believe I wasn't seeing things. No one spoke, but no one stopped the mocking chuckles echoing from nearby tables either. I looked toward the head table where my daughter, Natalie, sat beside her fiancé. She was chatting with someone, unaware of what was happening at my table. I stood up, nameplate in hand, and walked toward them. "Liam," I asked, my voice low, trying to stay composed, "is this supposed to be a joke?" He didn't look at me. He took a sip of wine and replied with a voice colder than the night air, "No, it's the truth." My chest tightened like someone had reached in and squeezed it. Before I could respond, the well-dressed woman beside him, his mother, spoke. "At this point, sir, you should face reality. A child raised by someone without education or status, how could she ever be worthy of joining the foster family?" I turned toward her, ready to speak, when his father, gray-haired, face like stone, added, "We don't accept family ties built on pity. Natalie deserves a respectable father, not a construction worker with no degree like you." I gripped the nameplate so hard my nails pressed into my palm. My feet felt rooted to the floor, my mind spinning. Never in my life had I been humiliated like that, especially not on what was meant to be my daughter's happiest day. I opened my mouth, but a familiar hand grabbed mine. Natalie stood up, her wedding gown brushing across the tiles. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "Daddy, let's go home." I looked into her eyes. No tears, just clarity. "Are you sure?" I whispered. She nodded. "If I have to choose between this man and the one who took me to school at age 4 wearing cement-stained overalls, I choose you." No one stopped us, not a single voice called after us. The echo of Natalie's heels and my heavy steps filled the luxurious but hollow ballroom. The large doors slammed shut behind us, leaving behind the whispers and sneers. We walked in silence down the cobblestone path. The March night wind slipped through my thin blazer, making my shoulders tremble. I handed the car keys to Natalie. "You drive." She took them wordlessly. As the car pulled away from the golden-lit resort, I looked back at the place that was supposed to mark her new beginning. But it turned out, it was the moment she walked away beside the man society had labeled a fake father. Inside the car, the only sounds were the engine and our breathing. I hadn't spoken yet when Natalie quietly said, "Thank you, Dad, for not leaving me." I turned to respond, but she continued, firmer this time. "If getting married means losing you, then this wedding isn't worth a dime." I stayed silent, because if I had spoken right then, I would have cried. I once thought I'd spend my entire life alone on dusty job sites, eating cold sandwiches and ending each day in a 200-square-foot rental. That kind of life was familiar, plain, dull, but safe. Until one rainy April afternoon, I ducked into a small roadside cafe. The waitress was wiping a window table, a young woman with tired eyes, doing her best to smile. I sat on a rickety wooden chair near the window. She walked over and asked softly, "What can I get you?" Her voice had the worn tremble of someone who had lived through too much. I ordered an espresso without much thought. She left, and I figured that was the end of it. But when she returned with the coffee, she placed a small note beside the cup. Scrawled handwriting read, "If you need to wait out the rain longer, I won't charge extra." I looked up. Our eyes met for just a moment, but something shifted inside me. Her name was Rachel, 28, 6 months pregnant. I knew that not from curiosity, but because she said so during our next conversation, 3 days later when I came back. "If sitting near an unmarried pregnant woman makes you uncomfortable, you can pick another seat," Rachel said, half joking, half distant. "I'm used to being avoided." I didn't avoid her. I only asked, "Where's the baby's father?" "He left when I decided to keep the baby," she shrugged. "I don't blame him. Everyone has the right to choose their own path." I wasn't good at comfort. Next time I returned, I brought a box of clumsily homemade cookies. burnt at the edges. Rachel laughed until she teared up. The worst I've ever tasted, but the sweetest gesture. Our cafe chats turned into quiet walks by the lake after work. We didn't always talk, but the silence never felt empty. Some days Rachel simply placed her hand on her belly and stared into the distance. I didn't ask questions. I just stayed close. Until one night she called me, voice panicked through heavy contractions. "Adrian, I have no one else. Can you take me to the hospital?" I didn't hesitate. I bolted from my room, jumped into my beat-up pickup, and raced through the June storm. When her daughter was born, Rachel clutched my hand in the delivery room and whispered, "If you weren't here today, I don't know if I could have done it." The baby was named Ellie. Big dark eyes, tiny hands searching for warmth. I wasn't her biological father, but in that moment, hearing her first cry, I realized fatherhood had never been about blood. Rachel never said she loved me, and I never proposed. We had no rings, no ceremony. But I moved in when Ellie turned 2 months old. I changed diapers, soothed her at night, and pushed her stroller around the park every Sunday. Things I never imagined doing. I did them all, without question. Someone once asked, "Don't you feel foolish raising someone else's child like your own?" I just said, "Ellie calls me Dad, that's enough." Every time she ran toward me, muddy feet and all, yelling, "Daddy," like it was sacred. I knew no judgment could ever matter. Rachel once whispered to me late at night while Ellie slept, "Adrian, if it weren't for you, I don't know where we'd be." I didn't answer, I just looked at Ellie curled up with her teddy bear and held Rachel's hand a little tighter. I never earned a college degree, never wore a suit in an office, but I had a family, even if it didn't start the traditional way. And I had 2 girls, one I loved with everything I had, and one who called me Dad with everything in her heart. You don't need shared blood to be worthy of love. I didn't bring Ellie into this world, but she's the reason I learned what it truly means to live. Rachel started growing tired after long nights of relentless coughing. She often brushed it off, saying it's probably just a cold, or maybe I haven't been sleeping well. But I had worked long enough on dusty job sites with toxic fumes to know the difference between normal fatigue and something more dangerous. One morning, as I was getting Ellie ready for preschool, Rachel stood by the sink and dropped a glass with trembling hands. It shattered everywhere. She tried to steady herself, but her legs were giving out. I picked Ellie up and said quietly, "You need to go to the hospital." Rachel forced a weak smile. "Don't make a big deal out of it." A week later, the doctor spoke in a voice so gentle it was cruel. Terminal lung cancer. Not much time left. I couldn't breathe hearing it. Ellie whimpered in the waiting room, too young to understand anything other than that mommy would be in the hospital longer than usual. In the weeks that followed, I bounced between the job site, the hospital, and the preschool. I had no help, no siblings, parents long gone. We'd never had a wedding, no marriage certificate. On paper, I had no legal rights to Rachel or Ellie. One night at the end of September, as I sat beside the hospital bed, Rachel held my hand. Her breathing was heavy, but her eyes were firm. "I don't need any promises, but if you can, please don't let Ellie end up with people who see her as a burden." I held her hand, trying to stay calm even as my heart shattered. "No one needs to tell me to keep Ellie with me. She's my family." Rachel gave a faint nod, closed her eyes, and her hand went limp in mine, like a leaf falling from a branch. After a simple funeral, I sat frozen in our tiny apartment. The scent of Rachel's shampoo still lingered in the bathroom. A photo of the 3 of us at Central Park hung on the wall and tore at my chest. 2 days later, Margaret, Rachel's mother, knocked on the door. She wore all black and had a gaze as cold as a courtroom judge. "I think it's time Ellie returned to her legal relatives." "Is asleep," I said, blocking the doorway. "This is her home." "You have no rights," she snapped. "She's my blood. You're a stranger. A construction worker without education and no ties to this family. I'm the one Rachel trusted most. Rachel left no documents. You're not her legal father. But I'm the one Ellie calls Dad every single day." She said nothing more, just turned away. but the look she gave before walking off told me this wasn't over. A few weeks later, I received a summons from family court. Plaintiff Margaret Whitaker, filing petition for full custody of Ellie. I brought a thin file to the public defender's office. The gray-haired woman read it and sighed. This will be hard. No marriage, no adoption papers, no biological link. But I have Ellie, I said. I'm the one who feeds her breakfast every morning, the one who calms her after nightmares, the one Rachel chose. She was silent for a moment, then gave a quiet nod. Then we'll fight for that. The following months were a blur of hard labor by day and legal prep by night, something I never thought I'd have to understand. Every evening after putting Ellie to bed, I'd study legal terms, underline court documents, and rehearse in front of the mirror for the day I'd face a judge. At the hearing, when the opposing lawyer grilled me about income, education, and legal standing, I didn't dodge. I spoke about Rachel, the sleepless nights when Ellie had a fever, the time she fell off her bike and I carried her for a mile to the hospital because no cabs would stop, and about the one thing I lacked, a biological connection. The judge stared at me for a long moment before asking, "What do you believe makes someone a father?" I answered, "Not DNA. It's the small things no one sees. Wiping away her tears when she's disappointed, learning how to braid hair even though my hands are used to holding hammers." When the court finally ruled that I could continue raising Ellie under periodic supervision, I didn't cry. I just turned to the little girl behind me, her hand tightly holding mine, eyes shining. "Daddy, can we have toast and honey tonight?" "Yeah, your favorite." I don't know how rough the future will get, but at that moment, just seeing Ellie's eyes, I wasn't going anywhere. Each morning, before sunlight pierced the torn curtain of our rundown apartment in the south end of Dayton, the alarm went off at 5:30. That's when my day began. I'd slip out of bed quietly so I wouldn't wake Ellie, 4 years old then, hugging her teddy bear, snoring softly like a kitten. I made breakfast in silence, frying eggs with one hand while the other brewed coffee in a scratched-up old machine. Then I'd change into my work clothes, leave a note with pickup time, and kiss her forehead. On the ride to work, I'd sometimes wonder if I had the strength to keep going. But each afternoon when I stepped off the truck with aching legs from climbing scaffolds all day, just hearing Ellie call from the third-floor balcony reminded me I wouldn't stop. We lived simply but laughed often. On rainy days, I'd pile up pillows and blankets to make a castle, crawl in with Ellie and read books by flashlight. Some nights when she had a fever, I stayed up the whole night, sponging her forehead, reading stories, humming lullabies I could barely remember. The next day, I still showed up for work, still shouldered 90-pound cement bags with bruised shoulders. A neighbor once asked, "Isn't it hard, raising a kid that's not even yours?" I just shrugged. I didn't have fancy words. But when Ellie hugged me from behind on my bike and whispered, "I love you most in the world," no question could ever shake me. We got through shut-off notices when I forgot the light bill, laughed at burnt noodles and cheap pizza nights, and cried when Rachel became just a framed photo on the shelf. I told Ellie about her mom, how Rachel smiled when she saw her first steps, how she spent her last tip on a tiny sweater even though it wasn't that cold yet. When Ellie started first grade, I was lucky to land a site supervisor job on a high-rise downtown. The steady work paid enough for us to move into a brighter apartment, where Ellie had her own room. She taped a sign to the door, "Princess Ellie's Castle, knock before entering." Every night she still asked me to tell a story before bed. Not fairy tales. She preferred stories about when Daddy was young, like I was some kind of action hero. I told her about the elevator malfunction at a job site when I was 27, how we got stuck for 2 hours, and I kept the crew calm. Ellie listened with wide eyes like she was watching a movie. She grew up with a kind of courage I'd never seen in adults. When kids teased her about not having a real dad, Ellie calmly replied, "I do have a real dad. He's the one who waited 3 hours in the rain just to bring me the lunch I forgot at home." Her words always left a lump in my throat, but I hadn't failed. We never took fancy vacations. Instead of Disney World, I took Ellie camping at Greenwood Lake. We built our own fire, burned hot dogs on the edges, and watched fireworks reflect off the dark water. Ellie rested her head on my arm and whispered, "I wish Mom could see me now, huh, Daddy?" I just nodded. If I'd said anything, I would have broken down. I lost count of how many times Ellie startled me with her maturity. One evening, I came home still smelling like paint from work. She was folding paper at the dinner table. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm writing a thank you note to my teacher. She said my handwriting looks just like yours." I stood there, silent for a moment. "You think so?" "Yeah, because you were the first one who taught me how to write an A." Then she turned back and drew a little red heart next to her signature. I stood watching her, feeling like I was reborn every day in those eyes. Not everyone understands what it means to be called daddy by a child who doesn't share your DNA, but anyone who's been through it knows it's the kind of love that wakes your soul stronger than anything else. Ellie got into the art academy in Cincinnati when she turned 18. The night she received the acceptance letter, she screamed with joy and hugged me in our little kitchen, which still smelled like the meat I forgot on the stove. "I did it, Daddy." Ellie's eyes burned so bright it made my chest ache. I was proud, but my heart felt heavy. It was time to tell her the truth. No one pressured me. No law required it. But Ellie deserved to know where she came from, not because it mattered more than love, but because I didn't want a stranger to someday throw it at her with the same disgust I'd once experienced. Sunday night, after she'd finished doing the dishes, I sat at the table, waiting for her to take the seat across from me. It took a few minutes before I could speak. Not because I lacked courage, but because the wrong words could leave scars that never healed. "Ellie, there's something I need to tell you. It won't be easy to hear, but I think you're old enough to understand." She paused, eyebrows drawn. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "You don't share my blood. I'm not your biological father." The air shifted. Only the ticking clock dared to speak. Ellie didn't say a word. Her eyes didn't flinch. No blame, no retreat. She just listened. I continued, "I met your mom when she was pregnant with you. The man who got her pregnant left the moment he found out. She chose to keep you, even knowing she'd be alone. I had nothing to do with your birth, but from the moment you came into this world, I've never seen you as anything other than my daughter." I couldn't look her in the eye when I said it. I was afraid I'd see something broken I couldn't fix. But then I heard the chair move. Ellie came around and wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her head on my shoulder. "I know," she whispered. "You never planned to say it, but the way you looked at Mom when she was alive, and the way you held me when I was delirious with fever, that's not something biology decides." I turned to face her. "You're not mad?" "Why would I be? Anyone can give me a name on a birth certificate. But only you stayed up reading to me until I fell asleep. Only you worked until your hands bled, but still remembered to buy me cake for my birthday. I'm your Ellie. Always have been." No tears, no drama. Just a simple, honest conversation between two people who had shared too many unspoken days for anyone else to ever understand. After that, Ellie started asking more about her mother, about the day she was born, what Rachel liked to eat and wear, how she used to laugh when Ellie wobbled across the floor trying to walk. I told her everything. No sugarcoating, no hiding. Ellie wrote it all down in a small notebook she called Mom's Memoir. She went off to school, only visiting during holidays, but every time she crossed that threshold, Ellie would shout, "Daddy, did you save me some apple pie?" Then, without waiting for my answer, she'd run into the kitchen and open the fridge like she'd never left. One summer afternoon, Ellie brought home her boyfriend, a tall college student, probably 6 feet, dark-skinned, hands a little awkward as he greeted me. After dinner, while Ellie was clearing the table, he turned to me and hesitantly asked, "I once asked Ellie why she respects you so much, even though you're not her biological dad?" I smiled, resting my arm on the table. "And what did she say?" He chuckled softly. "She said, because my dad didn't choose to bring me into the world, my dad chose to stay." That sentence lit up my entire chest. Turns out being a father isn't about how much DNA you share. It's about the quiet decision you make every single day to keep walking beside them through cold dinners, tired evenings, and life's messiest moments. I didn't give life to Ellie, but I lived every moment to keep her in mine, and that has never been a regret. The wedding was held on the grounds of a luxury lakeside hotel in Wisconsin. White carpet stretched along the lake, wooden chairs lined with golden ribbons. It looked like a dream wedding, but when I walked into the reception hall, the first thing that hit me wasn't the flowers or crystal lights. It was the nameplate at my seat on the head table. Father without a degree, no blood ties, please stay in your place. Not a single person from the groom's side offered an explanation. The glances around the room seemed to wait for me to explode, like they wanted my anger to justify the cruelty they'd orchestrated. I didn't give them that satisfaction. I sat down, folded the card in half, and slipped it into my suit pocket. A few minutes later, I stood up and walked over to the groom, atHer, the same guy who once bowed politely at our door and shook my hand firmly when asking to take Ellie on a picnic. I held the folded card out in front of him. "And what is this?" He looked me straight in the eye, his gaze stripped of any awkwardness. "We thought it was best to be clear," he said, voice calm to the point of indifference. His mother stepped in, one hand resting on her husband's wrist like a signal to stay composed. "We believe some people need to understand boundaries. When our son marries, we expect a family that's a proper match. No one said you couldn't attend, but there's no need to pretend you're family." Each word hit like a sledgehammer. The silence in the room felt complicit. Just then, Ellie appeared in her white wedding gown, eyes locked onto mine. She walked over, looked past my shoulder at the table, then down at my hand, seeing the folded card. "Daddy, what's going on?" Her voice was soft, but steely cold. I didn't answer. I just opened the card and handed it to her. Ellie read it in seconds. When she looked up, her lips pressed tight, eyes shining. But instead of tears, she turned and walked straight toward the altar, where atHer and the officiant stood waiting. The room stirred. Everyone thought the bride was simply beginning the ceremony. Ellie didn't sign. She snatched the stack of papers from atHer's hands, tore it into thirds, then snapped the pen in half on the signing table. Her voice rang through the hall. "Did you really think I'd blindly take your last name?" The sound of tearing paper was like ripping the mask off atHer's face. His mother froze, stepping back so quickly she nearly fell from the flower-decorated stairs. Ellie turned to me and placed the same small hand that once clung to mine through childhood back in my palm. "Let's go home, Dad." We walked out of the wedding hall under the murmurs and stares of hundreds. The glass doors closed behind us, and the lake wind on my face felt cooler than ever. In the car, Ellie didn't cry. She sat still, eyes locked on the tail lights ahead. I glanced at her, about to say something, when she spoke up. "I was stupid. 3 years of dating just to realize he never respected you. Or me. It happens. We all misjudge people sometimes," I said softly. "But I let them humiliate you, right in front of everyone." Her voice cracked, though no tears fell. "No one has the right to call you unworthy." I didn't respond. The red light turned green. The car rolled on through the night, the classical music on the radio drifting like a quiet storm inside us. 2 weeks later, I was replacing a burned fuse in the garage when Ellie showed up holding an envelope. "Dad, look at this." I wiped my hands and took it. The logo belonged to a major news outlet. Bennett Family Company, facing liquidity crisis. Top investor pulls out unexpectedly. CEO under multiple internal investigation. atHer's last name was Bennett. His family ran a chain of medical equipment assembly plants. I said nothing. Ellie crossed her arms and sat on the toolbox. "Did you have anything to do with this?" I folded the paper and set it on the wooden shelf. "I used to invest in their company. When I saw how they treated people, I sold all my shares." "Right after the wedding?" Ellie asked, eyes fixed on me. "That night, I called a lawyer friend. No point holding shares in the hands of the unkind." Ellie chuckled. "So they lost everything because they underestimated the uneducated father." I shrugged, neither confirming nor denying. Some acts of justice don't need the label of revenge. Let life play its own script. Friday afternoon, while I was reorganizing some maintenance contracts for a school project, I got a text from an unknown number. The Bennett family just went bankrupt. They don't know who's behind it, but I bet you do. No signature, but I knew exactly who sent it. I didn't reply. No need. 3 years ago, I quietly started collecting shares of Bennett Holdings under a legal entity managed by a friend, an accountant, who once worked at the old industrial park. When Ellie started dating Ethan, I grew suspicious of that family. Not because of their flashy careers, but because of how they saw people as either assets or decor at the dinner table. I'd learned to observe in silence ever since I was the boy delivering bread at dawn in the rich neighborhoods. They'd smile when they needed something, then turn and mutter that I smelled like sweat the moment I left. But I never expected Ethan to inherit both the arrogance and the stupidity. His wedding wasn't just a public insult. It was the perfect excuse to pull the final curtain. That night, after Ellie had gone to bed, I sat at my desk in the corner of the living room, opened my laptop, and logged into the investment system. Within 24 hours, I transferred all holdings, nearly 67% voting power, to a foreign group that had long wanted to acquire Bennett but was always blocked by the board. No one suspected the release valve came from a former worker who had once begged for a security job at a Bennett-owned plant in 1998. Me. 3 months later, internal shakeups pushed the Bennetts out of leadership. 6 months after that, they lost control of the Iowa plants and most of their shares were seized by banks. 1 year later, the Bennett name only showed up in finance articles titled, "A Cautionary Tale About Trusting Bloodlines Over Character." No one contacted me. No one guessed the man they once called the fake, poor, uneducated dad was the one who unraveled it all. Until one spring day, I was sitting at a bakery near home, reviewing electrical plans for a commercial building, when the door opened. Ethan stood in the doorway, thinner, beard unkempt. Behind him were his parents, once dressed in shimmering silks, now in cheap coats. The three stood before my table like statues coated in dust. Ethan bowed his head. "Mr. Adrian, I want to apologize." I wasn't surprised. Just folded my documents and sipped my coffee. That's in the past. His father cut in, still clinging to pride. "We didn't come to ask for anything, just wanted the truth." I looked him straight in the eye. "When you read that nameplate at the wedding, did you know how much of your company I once owned?" They froze. No answer. I pulled a notarized share transfer document from my jacket, clearly dated, and placed it on the table. "I didn't do it for Ellie. She's strong enough to stand on her own. I did it because you thought arrogance was eternal, and other people's dignity was just party decoration." Ethan bowed lower. His mother teared up, but said nothing. The world isn't divided into educated and uneducated, rich and poor. It's divided into those who know how to love and those who treat love like something to be priced. Unfortunately, you chose the wrong side. I stood, grabbed my folder, and walked out. No footsteps followed me. Outside, the snow was melting in patches. On the lake, the ice cracked into thin lines like fading scars. I felt no anger, no satisfaction, just light. As if I'd finally unfastened the stone tied to my chest for a nameless decade. Ellie didn't have a grand wedding. No bellowing gown, no fireworks, no loud live music by the lake. Just a quiet meal in the backyard of the 2-story wooden house she now shared with a man named Lucas, a machine engineer working near the mountains in Asheville. When she called to tell me, her voice was light, like talking about the seasons changing. "I found someone who doesn't make me try so hard to be accepted." Lucas had a 6-year-old daughter named Kayla, shy and quiet. The first time I met her, she hid behind her dad the whole time. I brought a little toy duck, Ellie's childhood favorite. I set it in my palm, pressed the button to make it go quack, quack, then pretended to be scared. Kayla burst into laughter. After that, she followed me around the whole afternoon. I moved in with Ellie and her little family after selling the old house. Age had taken some strength from my hands, but I could still fix up Kayla's desk, repair the old fridge in the kitchen, and plant a few rows of vegetables in the backyard. Lucas worked shifts, and Ellie started a nonprofit called Ellie's Shelter. dedicated to helping homeless children in the area. She used part of the investment savings from before to lease land, build houses, and hire a small team. "I'm not doing this out of pity for the kids," Ellie said one early morning while we made coffee together. "I'm doing it because I know how it feels to grow up without anyone ever saying your name with pride." She didn't need to say who had once done that for her. I already knew. Keela grew more attached to me. Every morning she waited outside my door with a marker, asking me to draw her favorite animal on her lunchbox. "Grandpa, let's do an elephant today." Once, she asked, "Why doesn't Daddy Lucas call you Dad?" I smiled and said, "Because your dad's a grown-up, but you still get to call me the cutest way you want." In the afternoon, I picked Kayla up from the bus stop, hand in hand down the windy hill. At first, some neighbors eyed me curiously. Now, every time we passed, they greeted, "Good afternoon, Grandpa." Nobody asked anymore why I didn't look like Lucas or Kayla. That no longer mattered. Ellie often held small workshops on child psychology. Every time she invited me to speak to the kids about the life of a father without a college degree, I'd start with, "Do you know how many kinds of families there are?" Then I'd talk about Rachel, that rainy night full of blood and baby cries, the shaming placard at the wedding, and the little girl who once held my hand as we walked away from it all through a sea of mocking laughter. Lucas would always listen silently. One day, while repainting the upstairs window, he called down, "I never thought I'd call anyone Dad again, but if you're okay with it, I'd like to try." I didn't react right away. I set the brush on the step, looked at him, and said, "As long as you treat Ellie the way she deserves to be treated, you don't have to say it. I already see you as family." That evening, while the whole family gathered by the stove, Kayla jumped onto a chair and shouted, "I'm gonna have a baby brother." Ellie laughed. "Yep, a little brother. Better come up with a cool name." Lucas turned to me and said, "Looks like we'll need another crib. Guess we'll need your help again." I nodded, eyes landing on Ellie as she gently rubbed her belly, where a small life was growing in love, not caring which genes created it. What would raise this child, just like Kayla and Ellie, wouldn't be DNA, but the hands holding them at midnight, the soothing voice during a fever, the quiet eyes following every unsure little step. I was once called unworthy to be a father. Now, I'm the first person Kayla runs to when she scrapes her knee, the one Ellie asks for advice when starting a new project, the one Lucas trusts with the roof over their heads. In this small house on the hill, where morning light spills through the curtains and children's laughter echoes from the grassy yard, I've found something I once thought impossible: a real family. No blood required, no title needed, just a heart wide and brave enough to love, as if you brought them into this world yourself. Adrian's story isn't just a father's journey. It's proof that love and sacrifice can transcend bloodlines, education, or status. In a world that often defines worth by pedigree and degrees, he quietly showed that a sincere heart is the strongest foundation a family can have. His life today, with his daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren, is living proof that true happiness is built on trust, not genetics. What do you think about Adrian's choices and his journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family, resilience, and what truly matters.